So let's get started. When we create this program and run it, since it's going to be a console program, it's not going to be very pretty. But the reason that I did this, and I have 6 different person objects, hopefully will become clear to you as we go on. I'm trying to test different kinds of conditions. That's why it was done that way. So if you would, under your file, new project, this is going to be a console app. Now where I've been saving this stuff, I already have one called person, so I'm just going to save it into some other place. Remember, 3 weeks from today, we're going to have these students in from Lewis and Clark. All right? And I'm going to count on you to teach them. I'm going to talk about the program for a few minutes, and then you guys are going to teach them. All right? There's going to be 33 of them in here. You might say, well, that's going to be cramped. Yes, it is. And what I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, and if you do mind, there's not much I can do about it, but if you don't mind, if students can use your machines too, because 24 plus 9 is 33. Otherwise, I'm going to have people double up. All right? Okay, so yes.
I was going to say, do you know what teacher is coming? 'Cause I
No.
went to that.
I don't have any idea. I don't know anything about the school, so I haven't been told anything. All right, so this is going to be a console app. And again, where I've saved mine, I already have one in there called person, so I'm not going to save it right in that area. But now I should be able to type in person. All right, that's what we're going to call this, is just person. Since it's a console app, when you get done, it's going to come up and it's going to look like this. Okay? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up as I always do, and then line 1, I'm going to type in using static system.console. All right, that's the first thing I'm going to do. Now, I'm not going to worry about writing a lick right now inside of main. We'll write that later. All right? We're going to create the person class first. Hopefully you remember how we do that. If you look up on the screen here, you take your mouse, all right, and you right mouse click on the project, which is named person, and you choose add new item, just like that. So right mouse click on your project that's called person, choose add and new item. It's all up on the screen here. All right? And if you say, oh, geez, I don't know how to do that. Well, you should by now, and you're going to have to do this for the test. It's not a warning, it's a promise. How's that? Well, you're threatening us. I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you, if you want to be able to do the test, you're going to have to do this. All right, so new item. Remember, the first thing that comes up there is class. That's the one we want. We don't want to call it class 1. All right, we literally want to call this person. And notice the caseness. Always capitalize your class names. If you run three words together, if you call it income tax rate, make the I in income, the T in tax, and the R in rate all capitalized. As opposed to if it's a variable, you don't capitalize the first letter. I'm just telling you because that's the way people do it out in the biz, so to speak. All right? So let's go ahead and put that in, and I'm going to click add. And you'll notice, if you look over here, I now have a second file, person.cs. All right? And you should as well. All right? First thing I'm going to do is just like we just did, and I'm lazy, so I want you to put in that using static system.console in there as line 1. Again, we've got 14 lines, which means we have about 180 lines that we have to keep typing. Okay? All right. So I'm going to come down here into my class person, and as always, I'm going to say declare and initialize. First, we'll put in our program constants. And we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. How do we start a constant? Const. Remember, it's const followed by the type. All right? I tried to put these kind of in order for the way our class is going to be set up. That's why it's done this way, just so you know. So first I've got const string def ssn equals xxx dash xx dash xxx. Now, does this make sense to you? That def is short for default. It's not for somebody who can't hear. All right? But def SSN is the default social security number, which says if we don't know the person's social security number, what we'll put in instead is XXX-XX-XXXX. Does that make sense? So I'm going to put a comment there that says default soc sec num. And I'm just going to put in the rest of them, and then we'll go back and we'll look at all of them. So I'm supposing that there's, that the smallest person is going to be a foot, and the largest person is going to be 7.5 feet. All right? I'm also supposing with the weight that the smallest person will, what we're going to allow in here will be a pound, and the largest person will be 777 pounds. Again, we could change that if we wanted to or needed to. We could change that. I'm going to just keep it this way. So what I'm telling you is if you were writing this for someone, you may have to put in different values. All right? I want to say something. Does this make sense to you that if, let's say that Brady here, he's contracted by some company and they want him to create this. He's constantly, if he knows what he's doing, he's constantly going to be talking with the people there to get their input. He shouldn't type in 10,000 lines of code and then show it to them and say, what do you think? Because if they turn around and say, we don't like it, it's not that you won't be able to use that 10,000 lines, but you might have to massively change them. And the reason I'm bringing this up is it doesn't matter if you're creating a website for someone or you're creating an application for someone. It's important to have those lines of communication open and flowing, as they say. One of the reasons that you're forced, and I like to use that word, one of the reasons that you're forced here to actually take your gen ed classes is so that you learn those soft skills. All right? The days are pretty much gone where you have a programmer who sits in the corner and does nothing all day long but program. It just doesn't happen anymore. All right? I'm also going to set my default height. We're going to set that to 77 inches. And I'm also going to set a default weight. All right, the default weight we're going to set to 222 pounds. And again, not to be funny, but you say, well, why'd you pick those? I just picked them. They have no significance whatsoever to the way this program runs. You know, we could have picked different values if we needed to, wanted to, or whatever. All right, I'm going to add 3 more constants. And they will be def eye color. Here. Which maybe this is terrible, but I set the default eye color to bloodshot. If you look up on the screen here, why am I getting that underline right here? Yeah, because that's got to be a string. Again, these are things that, I'm sorry to put, I don't know any other way to put it, these must start clicking for you. All right? So we've got a default eye color. Let's have a default hair color. And I'm going to set that to orange. Now, you might look at that and go, okay, I see what you're doing. Why did you pick bloodshot and why did you pick orange? I tried to pick values that people wouldn't have. I can't think of anybody on their driver's license where they have an eye color that it says bloodshot. But I will now be able to go in and look, and anytime I see bloodshot or anytime I see orange, I will know that default values were put in. Does that make sense? So I purposely tried to pick values that probably wouldn't be used very often. I mean, I could have come in here and I could have set the default weight to 555 pounds. All right? I could have set the default height to something else, but those are just what I picked. So the last thing we want is the default gender. Which I'm just going to set equal to F. Remember, with the character, it's got to be within single quotes. So we've got 10 different constants. Any question on any of those? Any of those that don't make sense? If you're still typing, again, you've got to start typing faster. Then don't put the comments in. Put them in later. All right. No questions? Then I'm going to go on. Then I'm going to declare and initialize the program variables underneath that. Again, you don't have to put the constants first and then the variables, except that's how people normally do it. Okay? And I probably have mentioned this to you before, and you'll probably hear it again. If you get hired at a company, all right, your job for the first year is to fit in, not stand out. Does that make sense? You don't want to come in there and on the second day say, you know what, I was looking over your code and I'm sorry, but it really sucks. But don't worry, because I'm here now and I'll make it better. All right? Believe it or not, I mean, there are horror stories out there of people who have done that. Seriously. All right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 variables. Now think about this. All right, if you know, go back to your single page for just a second. Go back to your single page right here, this page. Okay? And take a look at line 30, 31 and 32. Okay? I just used my family, including my brother in here. But if you look at line 32, you've got Chloe. That's going to be a first name. Does that make sense? You've got Scott, which is, although most people will tell you is a first name, can also be a last name. So that's 2 fields. You've got 333-44-5555, which to my knowledge is not our social security number, but that's a social security number. All right? You've got 666. I purposely put in an out of range weight. So that's 666's weight. You've got 1125, which is symbolic of height, which again is out of range. All right? You've got gray, which is an eye color, red, which is a hair color, and F, which is a gender. Do all those make sense? Reason I'm telling you that is those are your 8 variables. First name, last name, social security number, height, weight, eye color, hair color, and gender. So, jumping back to our code, that's what I'm going to put in here. String, whoops, let me move that there. String, and I just called it F name for first name. Person's first name. And it's got to be a semicolon, not a period. And since I'm kind of lazy right now, I'm just going to copy those in. Again, if you're a slow typist, get used to using shortcuts. All right, so I've got first name, then I want the last name. Oops, sorry. Then the SSN, which is going to be the person's social security number. Height, and that's going to be an int, which is the person's height. Next, as you'd guess, is going to be weight. Yes.
I was going to say, should we not initialize these?
Do not initialize these. We're going to do that in the constructor. All right. Eye color. Which, as you guess, is the person's eye color. Hair color, which again is the person's hair color. And I left one out. I'll put it in right now. And a char for gender. All right. So I'll give you a second to put those in. So the program that I gave you is got 5 entire pages and then a little bit at the top of another page. We're just about done with the first page. Okay. Colin had a very good question though. When you work with object-oriented programming, you do not initialize variables here. It's not that you cannot, it's that you do not. All right, that's what a constructor is for. Any questions on any of these variables that are right here? What I did, why I did it, or whatever? Yes.
Now on the variables on the constant, they're only for the class person, right? They're not for the class program.
No, there is no. No, they're all going to be used for a person. Yes. Right. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to start putting in my constructors. Okay? And I'm going to have the one constructor that starts on the bottom of page 1. And I'm going to have another constructor that's on page 2 and another constructor below that on page 2. If I have 3 different constructors and they all have the same name, but they have different values in those parentheses, what have I done with a constructor? I have, no. When you take a method and you give it more than one implementation. What is that? Overloading. So I'm going to overload the constructor. The first constructor that I'm going to put in is what's called a no-arg constructor. Okay? A no-arg constructor means nothing in the parentheses. Does that make sense? So please look up on the screen here before we put it in. That means they're going to get a default social security number, a default height, a default weight, a default eye color, a default hair color, and a default gender. Does that make sense? Now I could have put in here default F name for first name and a default L name, but I just put them into this routine. Why did I do that? I don't know why. All right, because I was kind of bored yesterday and I was sitting in here at my desk yesterday writing this. I don't know why. But there's a lot of ways that it can be done. So, again, this will be what's called our no-arg constructor. So I'm going to put a comment there. No-arg constructor. Now, your book doesn't call it that. Your Java book will call it that. You could take this program and make almost no changes to it and get it to run under Java. Literally, you could make 5 minutes worth of changes, and that's it. And it would work under Java. So we're going to say here public person, person, paren. All right. That's the end of page 1. So if you are following along with the hard copy too, turn it over because we're now on page 2. All right. So I'm going to say F name is equal to, and I just said this, unknown FN. I know that's a stupid thing to say, and L name equals unknown LN. So that's saying that if we call this, please look up on the screen here, even if you're typing, just stop for a second. This is the constructor that will be called if I create a new object and put nothing in here. Does that make sense? That's what it means for a no-arg constructor. It means we are going to create an object and not pass anything to the object. So it's going to get all default values. So I just added these two. Now I could come in here, if I wanted to, I could come in here and say height equals def height, weight equals def weight, eye color equals def eye color, hair, etc. I could do that. But instead of putting that in right here, I might want to use it again later, so I wrote another routine that I called default SSNHWEHG. What a crummy name, Jeff. Well, what that name means is default social security number, height, weight, eye color, hair color, gender. But that's a little less typing than if I would have put all that stuff in. I could have done that too. You can make these names usually up to about 255 characters. But it's ugly enough as it is. All right? And why am I getting the squigglies underneath? Because we haven't written it yet. All right? So even though it's a little bit out of turn from what's in the book, I'm going to put it in here right now. We'll put other stuff in here too, but I'm going to type in here right now, public, void, and then this god-awful name here. Notice as soon as I put that in, the squigglies go away. Everybody see that? Yours should as well. The only reason they wouldn't would be if you mistyped it. Because then you'd have a method called one thing and you'd be calling it, giving another name. All right? And it pretty much is what you think it is. SSN equals def SSN. Height equals def height. Oh, not hair color, sorry. Weight equals def weight. Eye color equals def eye color. Hair color equals def hair color. And gender equals def gender. That's the whole routine. And I'll give you a second to put that in, but then I want to talk about it for just a second. You don't have comments in yours, but I'm just going to put a comment here that says assign default values to social security number, height, weight, eye color, hair color, and gender. It's always nice when you write something like this to comment it up the wazoo, especially if I'm the programmer and I've been there 10 years. I probably don't want to do a lick of commenting. However, I know when I write this, when I get done, Colin's going to take it over. And he's just started and he doesn't have very much experience. So I do that so he knows what I'm doing. You know, the litmus test for this is, you know, if you've got a thing in there that says, like if we had said height plus plus, you don't need a comment in there that says add 1 to height. I mean, that'd be just stupid. But it's nice. These are typically called prologues. In fact, what a lot of people do, just so you see this, is instead of the way I wrote it here, they put it up here. And it doesn't really matter. All right? But it's kind of nice to have prologues in there like that just so people realize what's going on. All right? Now, I don't want you to type this in because we're not going to till later, okay? But if I were to come in here, I'm going to go back to main for a second. Don't do this. But if I came in here and typed in person, Jeff equals new person. If I were to do that, that would look for a constructor that has no arguments. And it would come back here and it would find it right there. So it would set my name to unknown F name. It would set my first name. It would set my last name to unknown LN. And then it would set all the other ones to default values. Does that make sense? Because that's what's happening here. All right, so that's the first constructor. So that says that we know absolutely nothing about the person. Nothing. But what if we do this? And this will be the next one that we actually do put into main. All right. So I'm going to say Sandy, my wife. And I'm going to put in here Sandy Scott. All right. What does that mean? Well, right now I'm getting these squigglies because we haven't written that constructor yet. But that's going to be, this constructor expects no arguments. This constructor expects 1, 2 arguments, and both of them to be strings. Does that make sense? All right. I mean, hopefully what we're doing here is just common sense to you. So I'm going to come back here to my person, and right underneath my first constructor, so in between the first constructor and this default thing I just wrote, I'm going to go in and I'm going to drop in another constructor here. All right. So this will be a 2-arg constructor. So it'll be string, and I'm going to call it FN for first name, and a string, and I'm going to call it LN for last name. All right. So now FN, or F name will be FN, and L name will be LN. If you look up on the screen here, notice the squigglies have gone away in main. So now I can either create a new person and pass in nothing, or I can pass in 2 strings. All right, I have my choice, and we'll do both. Now, if you look up on your screen, I'm going to type something in, but I'm going to remove it. All right, if I had done this, if I had typed in here F name and L name, I didn't do that, but had I done that, then I would have to say here this dot F name equals F name, and this dot L name equals L name. Does that make sense? I'd have to do that. Well, I don't want to do that. Then don't call your formal parameters the same name as their actual counterparts. do something like this, like I just did with FN and LN, which makes this has got to become FN, and this one has to be called LN. Do you notice that when you take a look at this, I can still put the word this in there if I want to? It's totally legit. You can still use it. So now when it comes in, you've already seen this, but when it comes in for Jeff, all right, Jeff should come up here, and it should set my first name to unknown F name, my last name to unknown L name, my social security number to all those X's, my default height to 77, I wish, my default weight, which is pretty close, to 222, all right, my default eye color to bloodshot, probably close, my default hair color, orange, all right, I originally did make this bald to begin with, all right, and the default gender, it's going to say that I'm female because it's going to hit all those default values, all right? Then we're going to come in and we're going to have a person named Sandy. You can already tell that's going to be the first name, that's going to be the last name. And that's exactly what we have with this constructor. So we set the first name and the last name, then all of the rest will be set default values. Does all that make sense? And I'd say, seriously, if it doesn't, go back and please read the book. All right? There's a lot of nuggets and good information in this book that either, if it's something's good, I don't try to overlook it. But I'm not going to say that I hit every single thing that's in the book. I try to hit what I think is the most important. All right, we want to write one more constructor. Okay, so my 2R constructor, I'll grab this prologue that I just put in, and I'm going to copy it in here because I kind of like it. So assigns default values to social security number, height, weight, yeah, that's true. Takes passed in values for first and last name, assigns default values to everything else. Does that make sense? Again, I'm putting a lot of documentation in here. I want you to be able to go back, however you learn this, I want you to be able to go back on your time. And I want you to be able to look at this and go, why did we do that? Oh yeah, that's that comment. That's why you write those comments. All right? So we have one more constructor that we want to put in. One more. And that constructor is going to take everything. So I'm just going to grab this constructor that we just put in right here, copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to put it in here again. But now I'm going to put in everything. So string first name, string last name, string SSN for the social security number. What else is there? There's an int for the height. There's an int for the weight. There's a string for the eye color. There's a string for the hair color. And there's a char for the gender. Does all that make sense? And I'm going to grab this. And we're passing in what now? We're passing in everything. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is an 8 argument constructor. Oops, I don't know what I did there. Takes in passed in values for first name, last name, social security number, height, weight, eye color, hair color, and gender. Again, you don't have to put in those comments. All right? I've told you my own stories. I have never, ever in my life created something where somebody came back later and said, why the hell did you put in so many frigging comments? Usually it was just the opposite. It was, thank you for putting in all the comments. It made your program understandable. You know, we talked about this in a much earlier chapter. Remember when we talked about what a compiler was? And how it took what you typed in and it changes it to the zeros and ones the computer can understand? Remember that? Guess what? The first two things the compiler does when it goes through your program, the first thing it does is it strips out all blank lines and all comments. It strips those out. So you can put as many comments in as you want, all right? It may slow down the program because the compiler's got to take the time to strip those all out. But putting in comments is never a bad thing. Now, I'm going to put this back up here because I'm just going to copy these. We got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So we wanted to put all these in. So we've got first name, last name, SSN. Height. In fact, that isn't correct. L name, what do we call that? SOS. I don't remember what we called it, so we have to look it up. Yeah, it is SN. Equals SSN. Height, weight, eye color, hair color, we're going to change this in just a minute, just so you know. And finally, G. Gender is G. All right, so again, that is taking in the past values for all 8 of our fields. There it is. I want to ask you a question here, all right? I'll give you a hint. The answer is 2, all right? Which fields right here, when you look at this, do you think we'll probably have to do validation on? Which 2 fields? Which 2 fields do we have default values for? You say, well, yeah, we had default eye color, etc., but it's these 2. If we happen to put in a wrong key, we put a minus sign, then we put 100. Nobody weighs minus 100 pounds, at least not on Earth. They don't. All right. So what we want to do is rather than putting this in, we're going to have each one of these call a routine that's going to validate the height and validate the weight. Did you hear that? And for that routine to be able to do its thing, it's going to need this value, because that's the height, and it's going to need this value, which is the weight. All right? Now I'm going to jump back to the other file for just a second, and I'm going to put in all valid stuff, just so you see it. So this is actually the last one that we put in. So person, I'm going to comment all these out, so let me put this in here. This will be Kenzie, this will be Chloe, and this will be Mark. All right. That is my brother. The kind of guy that the first time he meets you, if he likes you, he'll fart in front of your face. All right. That's the kind of guy he is. Almost 60 years old and still walks around and acts like that. All right. Okay. So it's going to be equal new person. But now I can give it all values. Mark, so that'll be the first name. Scott, so that'll be the last name. (444-55-6666), so that'll be the social security number. All right. 6, no, on the next page. 80 for the height in his dreams. 300, and he's not that heavy either. For the weight, green, I have no idea what color his eyes are. Bald, you know, he's got more hair than I do. And M. But if you look on the screen here, notice, please, no errors, because we now have a constructor that expects a string, an int, a string, and a character. Does that make sense? We're going to put in actual values for Taylor, for Kenzie, and for Chloe. But Taylor is going to purposely have an out-of-range height to make sure our height works okay. Kenzie's going to have an out-of-range weight to make sure our weight works okay. And Chloe's going to have both an out-of-range height and an out-of-range weight. It's one thing to go and write programs like this. It's another thing to go and write programs like this and be able to put in enough test cases so you actually test all of your code. It's very important that you do that. All right? Now, if you look up here, had I wrote in here, for example, 37 and 128, the program does, this is not an artificial intelligence program. It would think that Mark's first name is 37 and Mark's last name is 128. All right? The program can only do with it what we give it the ability to do. Does all that make sense? All right? So, I don't want to put these in here like this. I don't want either of those lines. I'm going to comment them out. You can just remove them if you want, but I'm going to comment them out and put in what I actually want to put in. I'm going to write methods to validate the height and validate the weight. Does that make sense? And here's a big surprise. The method to validate height, I called validate height. The one for validate weight, I called validate weight. It is, again, another step in taking your program and making it self-documenting. That's the idea behind this. All right? Next semester, I'm not going to say this to you, but from day one, if you don't use professional ways as far as the way you're going to get taken off on every program you do. Because I don't feel the need to say it because I'm harping on it now. So your program names, your class names, your variable names, your method names, it'll be expected that they're of professional quality. All right? You know, I don't want you to put in something like this, instead of calling it validate height, are you a midget or a giant? You know, I don't want that. I've had people do that before in the past, literally. And it might be funny first time, but it's not funny after that. All right? Plus, if it's the kind of thing you're going to show an employer, they won't find any humor in it. Believe me, with the politically correct world that we have today, not to be funny, you're not supposed to ever even say the word midget. It's little person. My wife watches all those shows on TV, Little Couple, Little People, Little this, Little that. All right? Little Women in LA, and you watch all these little women go to bars. I'm like, my God, I'd rather do anything. All right? And I mean anything than watch that stuff. No, it's really interesting. So she got me to watch one once. I'm like, okay, whatever you say. So we're going to call validate height, and we have to pass in the height. So somebody tell me, please, what do I put in those parentheses? H. Thank you. Not height, H. That's the local copy of it. I'm getting the squigglies because I haven't written it yet. And that'll be W. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So this is going to call a routine, one routine that's called validate height, and it's going to call one that's called validate weight. All right? Now, I've already got this thing that I wrote before, so I'm going to stick it right underneath that. So I'm going to have two routines. The good news is, please listen to this, the routines are identical to one another, except everywhere you have an H for height, you put in a W for weight. Does that make sense? So don't type it in twice. I don't care how good a typist you are. Create the first one, then copy the entire procedure and stick it right underneath it, change all the H's in height to W's in weight, and you're done. All right? So, I'm going to key in this one. Again, I'm going by my notes. Same notes that you have in front of you. So this is going to be my validate, public void validate height, and it expects an int to come in that's called h for height. All right. Notice now if I come back up here, see how the squigglies are gone? Okay, so let's write that one. And there's plenty of ways that I could write this. I use the question mark colon operator to say this, height equals, and I want the h there for, not h, I want that to say height. I'm putting this on multiple lines. You don't have to do that.
What's the question mark for?
We're going to go over all that in just 1 second. This is the entire routine, right there, not there. That is the entire routine. I'll let you type that in, then we're going to go over everything that's in it. Again, if you finished that already, copy everything. So if you want the comment, everything from here to here, put it right underneath, call it validate weight, but change all the H's to W's. Then you've got that one done. I'm going to do the same thing, and then I'll come right back to this. So don't worry if it goes away for just a second. It will come right back. You can see I'm getting all of these errors, or the errors that I got because I already had a routine by that name. All right, so let's go back and take a look at this one right here. Even if you're still typing, you'll have time to finish. Look on the screen, please. This is the validation. This is saying, is the height greater than or equal to 12, and is the height less than or equal to 90? That should make sense to all of you in here. Remember the question mark colon operator, it's called a ternary operator. That says, if this is true, do what comes after the question mark. And there's an error. Please look on the screen. There's an error. I'm sorry. That should be H, not height. It should be H, and the one down here should be just W. My error. I apologize. All right. So it says if it's within range, take the value we passed in, H, and assign it to height. If it's not within range, that's the colon, take the default height and assign it to height. Does that make sense? So if it's between 12 and 90, assign it. Otherwise, assign 77, which is our default value.
You said it's called a
Ternary operator, because it's got three operands. It's got 1, 2, 3 operands. Sometimes it's called the question mark colon operator. It means after the question mark, you do if it's true. After the colon, you do if it's false. Again, I think I mentioned this when we talked about it at the time. There might be, some of you in here might be a heck of a lot better at Microsoft Excel than me. You know, if you've done work with Excel, in Excel you write macros, that's in essence what you're doing here when you use the ternary operator. It's about as similar as you get in this language to writing a macro. Is there anything in this routine, right here, I'm asking you this, is there anything in this routine right there that doesn't make sense to anyone? Because it's the exact same routine as the one down here. So make a copy. Please don't type all that in again. All right, do a copy and paste. Yes, sir.
Couldn't you also write it where you don't have int w in the
Yes,
parameters?
yes.
And then just have it be weight?
We're going to do that next.
Okay.
Question?
So that's basically skipping doing an if statement?
Yes. Yes. As Colin said, I could have written this, I could have said, for example, here, if height is greater than, and I mean, maybe you want to hear this, because, you know, when you talked about it, I could have written if height or weight, whatever, let's just use weight because it's up here. We could have said if weight is greater than or equal to min weight and weight less than or equal to min weight, and then put a, not, you know, the equivalent of a then. So in the if block, I would have said weight equal W, else weight equal def weight. It's just a little less typing. If it makes more sense to you to use an if statement, by all means, in all seriousness, use an if statement. So again, I want to make sure you hear that. So we could have done this, and I'm going to comment this out, but we could have put in this. If so we could have said that if that's the case, curly brace, weight equal W. I'm going to comment all of this out. Else, weight equal def weight. So again, oh, sorry, don't need that. Come on. It's your choice. Hopefully I just demonstrated for you why you might want to use this instead of this.
Less code.
Yeah, it's less code. Now, remember that with the way that this is written here right now, since it's only one line, it would not be mandatory that you come in here and put in the curlies. So that would have cut 4 of these lines out if you wanted to do that. I don't ever suggest doing that, but you could if you wanted to. Right? Now I'm going to remove that comment, but does everybody understand what I just went through here? All right. All right. Brady asked a question, and it was a good question. Okay? It's going to sound weird, but I want you to take this whole routine, everything that you've got here, everything, copy it to the clipboard, and then paste it right underneath where it is. So you're making a copy of it right underneath where it is. Then go up to the first one here. All right. And what do we got in here? We want to write basically the same thing. All right. And now that I see this, I really should have put a this in there and I didn't, but that's okay. We'll put it in there. All right. So I'm going to remove this right there, and I'm going to put in this dot height. Okay. And then I'm going to change this right here so that instead of saying H, it actually has the word height in it. And actually, it'll work whether you put that in or don't put that in. It'll still work. But this has no parameters. This has a parameter. You hear that? You say, well, why do we need one with no, because we haven't written that code yet. All right, we're gonna write that code in a bit. We're gonna take a break in just a couple minutes. Please look up on the screen, regardless of where you are. Do the same thing with weight. Copy everything that's in your weight routine, copy it to the clipboard, paste it in, and you'll have one in here that doesn't have any parameters. And again, I'll put in a this dot, even though we don't have to, I will anyway. And this will be the word weight. Again, if you're going too fast, you've got the code right in front of you. Okay? After you've got all that stuff done, because we're making very good headway into this, we really are. If you notice, we've already written almost 130 lines, and this has about 190 in it. So we've written most of it. All right? Let's take a break. We'll come back at 10:15. Question?
Yeah, so with that, do you want to comment one of those out, or do you want both of those?
No, we want them both in there.
What's the, I guess what?
They're overloaded, right? They're overloaded methods, because we're going to call one of those from something we haven't written yet. We're going to call the one in the set routine when we do our property setters and getters.
Right.
And we didn't have to do it that way, but I did it this way to show you and further go over why you overload methods. All right? So I'll leave this up there, but I'm going to stop the tape, and then we'll start it up again. So.